All right. Hello. Welcome to episode 3 of
Hey,
Native Shark Startup. I'm Caleb Anderson, CEO of Native Shark, and I'm brought to you today with my co host, Nicholas Walker, who's the president of Native Shark. And today, we're just going to talk about some language education and some business and see where things go. We're still, this is only our third episode, we're still figuring out. Um, exactly what this podcast is, but we're getting some people coming into the chat now. It's been so far pretty fun to do this every week, live and be able to interact with the community so directly. This episode, as always, is brought to you by the Native Shark platform. Of course, go check us out at nativeshark.com and learn Japanese today. Get started.
you, s- that's quite the intro. You sound rather official.
Hey man, I figured third episode we got to get an intro. I list,
Yeah,
I put the last two on, or Chie put the first one on YouTube, and I just finished editing the second one to put on YouTube, and I was like, there was no intro. Who are we? What are we doing?
yeah,
So, hey, welcome Artemis, welcome Native Wasa. Thanks for coming.
yeah. Welcome. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah, we had tons of stuff planned for the first two. This is our third episode, right? Yeah,
right.
for the
Yep.
first two episodes. This one, we're kind of winging it, so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, there's a little bit less planned for this one, but that's okay. Well, let's see. How was the last week for you, Nicholas?
Splendid. Um, yeah, before we joined this, I was just browsing through lots and lots of sentences that we're preparing for the platform, and it's my favorite thing to do.
What do you mean, lots and lots of sentences that they're preparing for the platform?
So we've just been training lots of writers to write sentences according to our standard, and this is Japanese sentences where we have a Japanese writer write an example sentence and the context in which it would be used, and then assign the formality marker to it. And then Ray is training these writers to write them correctly, which is sometimes a challenge because they have a tendency to write Japanese that, while correct, is not supernatural,
Hmm.
which is why we make them write a context. Because if they, say include a particle in a sentence that you wouldn't normally say, but is grammatically correct to say, it's a lot easier for us to say, hey, that doesn't match this context you wrote, does it?
Hmm.
Um, so I have lots of fun reading these and getting excited that they're going to be in the platform in the not too distant future. We're For example, in the last week, we not finished, almost finished creating sentences for every Yoji Jukugo in all four phases that we're going to teach. I think there's like 400 of them or so. There's actually
400
quite a few that I
sentences.
probably something like that. Yeah.
Did you say that was for
Um,
phase two? Or
no, no, this is just Yoji
this is
Jukugo.
Yojuku?
So
Okay, okay.
they're
So it could be
spread
anywhere.
across
Could
all
be
four
anywhere.
phases. Yeah. Like we
Gotcha.
have, I think we have maybe like I don't remember how many are in phase one, but maybe just a
Yeah, there
handful.
are several. I do know that for sure.
Yeah.
Hmm.
The interesting thing here is there's actually quite a few that I don't know, but the Japanese native speakers have phase rated to like phases three or four, like four in the core phase, not four plus.
Yeah.
Um, so like, oh well, apparently I should have known this at that level, and I don't. So
Interesting.
I'm pretty excited to review these once we get translations for them and stuff.
Yeah, you get to review everything before anyone else.
Yeah, I'm the luckiest student we have.
Definitely. I'd say so. It's got all this content that you're looking at. Got to get it to the rest of us. But in the sync today we learned that um units will be individually publishable rather than being attached only to a publishing of a phase. We just got to get it hooked into the front end for the content management platform. So that's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, that's one of the problems we've had when trying to publish new units.
Yeah. So what's been happening is in order to publish new units, you had to publish a phase at the same time, which works when you're releasing all of phase one at once, or the first 7 lessons or first 7 units of phase two. But what about when you want to work on more phase two units, or units that might not be in any phase yet? Well, you couldn't publish them just yet, but that's been added to the back end, and now we just have to link it to the front end, and then we can start getting some of this backlog uh, one step closer.
Yeah, that'll be huge.
Hmm. Yeah,
Um,
that's good.
sounds like a little thing, but like there's a handful of little things that are slowing down, not slowing down, I should say impeding our ability to
Yeah, I don't think it's
publish
slowing down. I
units.
think it's literally impeding the ability. Oh, hey
Impeding, yeah.
Cinder, welcome to stream. Sharkwave.
Yo,
Alzora asks, any plans for holiday season? Do you have
I'll
any
probably be
plans?
doing more of what I'm doing now. No, I mean I'm sure on New Year's we'll
Yeah,
probably meet up with Ray's family because that's what they do in Japan.
right. I think for sure we're gonna. Actually, I think next week we're going down to Chase family for a bit of a like birthday party or something, and then yeah, of course around New Year's we'll visit the family and stuff, as that's the tradition in Japan.
Yeah, my
Mm.
family in the US really wanted us to go there for Christmas, but we wouldn't be able to come back to
Yeah, the
Japan.
world
So
is in a interesting place at the moment. Still, travel is very limited. It's a challenge. Hmm.
I'm looking at the topics that we have prepared, and I'm just wondering which one we should start with.
Well, we kind of were talking about one of them already, which is like why isn't Phase Two content coming out yet? When will it come out?
Oh, there it is.
Yeah, we
There
were
it
just
is.
sort of discussing that one before I kind of took us on a side path to talk about holiday seasons and say hi to Cinder. But yeah, okay, we can talk about that one. Yeah, why
Yeah,
isn't
what it comes down to really is just that we could, you know, power through and make some units for phase two with the team that we have and have them released not in a long time, the same way we did for the first 7 units of phase two, just to show that we can do that. But we don't, the goal is to have units coming out faster than any student could study them. So us just doing them the way we were doing them for phase one, it wouldn't work. We would never be faster than students. So we've had
yeah,
to take a step back and then rework the entire workflows. You'll notice that I was talking about creating sentences earlier
right.
in this, and that's because in a way a sentence is one of the key materials for a unit. It's smaller than a lesson.
Mm,
Um, and so we're first systematizing the creation of sentences. And that just creating a sentence that is publishable, right, is a 10-step process for us, you know.
mm,
And that involves everything from deciding what sentences should be created and for what words or kanji or topics, having them written by a native speaker, having the context clarified, having the formality markers set appropriately, having someone check to see that all of that was done correctly, getting a translation that's accurate, and then making sure that that accurate translation is natural, getting audio that fits the context of the sentence. And this is how this speaker would sound in this situation saying this sentence, making sure that that audio is high quality, and putting all of that into the platform, separating the words in the literal breakdown, all those things take a lot of time if it's just a couple of people doing them. So we've been really breaking down each little piece of this process and increasing the number of people working on each piece so that very soon here, it looks like within the next 2 to 3 weeks, we'll be having sentences created that are publishable very fast, certainly faster than a student could study
Hmm.
them. Um,
So I want to pause you for a second. So what you just described, you mentioned this 10-step process for getting
yeah,
a unit published, basically, right? Any unit has to go through this 10
or
step
or a sentence,
or a sentence
any
content,
studyable actually,
any studyable.
or any
Okay.
material, both. Yeah,
The,
material or studyable.
if a material has gone through a 10-step process and it's a part of a studyable, does the studyable also have to go through a separate 10-step process, or is some of that been accounted for during this
Well,
10-step process of the material?
it should just happen naturally as the material does it, because the only thing that's kind of unique is lessons, which I was going to get to.
Okay.
Because if we have like a sentence is a material, and
Right.
if we've decided that these 5 sentences are going to be in this unit, then by having those 5 sentences go through the 10-step process, that studyable is finished.
Gotcha.
If it's like vocab cards, for example.
Hmm.
But for a lesson, yeah, it's a little bit different. So once we have sentences, and sentences includes things like examples for kanji and things like that, um, and dialogues. Once we have those getting created quickly and to a high standard and efficiently, then we're going to worry about the lessons, which should be pretty fast, but it's the next step. So we're not doing it yet.
Right.
And then once we have that done, also, the units should be getting released quickly. So the goal is not to get some phase 2 units out next week or something.
Hmm.
The goal is to get it to where any student studying Native Shark will not run out of things to study, regardless of what pace they're using.
Gotcha. So what we're saying is that we want to get the process of new content creation to be smooth so that whenever anyone subscribes at any point, they're not going to run out of new content. That's what you're saying.
Yeah. And in the process, in order to do that, right, we've had to bring in more people because until now, it's
Right.
been basically Ray was the only person who knew how to do something like write a sentence that we would approve for
Right. So we've been
a
working on
certain
training
lesson.
writers essentially.
Yeah, she was the only person, and we've hired tons of freelancers in the past, and
Right.
it never worked out
Yeah.
because they wouldn't understand things about like the formality markers, the naturalness of a sentence, and
Yeah.
we really had to sit down and figure out how do we explain this so that a writer can get it right.
Hmm.
Because
Well, I think we didn't have a clear enough picture ourselves until more recently of how to describe it. I think that's part of the issue as
exactly,
well.
like we were doing it
Yeah.
sort of intuitively because like I
The
knew
two
what
of you were,
we
yeah.
didn't. Yeah, we knew what we didn't want it to be, which
Right.
is
Yeah.
at any sentence I've ever seen in any learning material, pretty much. I'd say
Right.
99.99% of sentences I've seen in any Japanese learning material are unnatural.
Right.
And we knew that we
That's
didn't want that,
that's a large
right?
amount. Yeah.
Yeah, and I only say I cannot remember anyone. I mean, like like a sentence like "sumimasen" or something is
Of
natural because it's
course.
one word and it's formal. So it's I don't want to say 100%,
Right.
but
Of course.
and that goes back to this thing of context is, in that context, would a person actually say this in this way? And then the argument from a teacher would always be like, well, this is correct. So like it's what students should say. And it's like, but do you say that? Do you say that to your sister if you're talking to
Right.
her? Or to even to your boss? Like you probably don't say it like that
Right.
if you're at work. So this is what kind of drove me insane as a student because I thought I was so good at Japanese after studying for years and years, and then I sounded different than all of my friends and all the people around me,
Right.
and it kind of just drove me crazy. And I thought, why didn't anyone teach me the way people actually talk?
Of
And the
course.
argument was that, well, if we taught you the way people actually talk, you wouldn't know the proper way to make sentences in Japanese. And I felt like I was being treated like an idiot.
Right.
um, where because like you can learn the rules and know that they're not always followed. That's why we have
Mm.
textbook sentences, like because the textbook sentences show you the rules, but the context in almost all of them are going to be things that are not a person talking to
Right.
another person.
Right. So,
It would be like the context for this is it's a question on a Japanese test. The context for this is like it's a sentence from a Wikipedia article.
right.
It's not something you would say usually in a textbook sentence.
So what we're
And
doing with the
so,
context is to make sure that it's, as a student, you understand that there's like the grammatical textbook way that things are written and taught, and you are exposed to that in Native Shark. But then also, and more importantly, we expose you to the natural sentences and way in which people talk and speak on a daily basis.
yeah, and it's been surprisingly a challenge to train native speakers to write sentences that sound
Yeah,
the way people talk.
I think it
So
kind of
that
makes
was,
sense.
yeah, and it did take us a while to sort of pin it down, but it seems that we have pinned it down because now we do have these collaborators we've hired, and they are writing sentences that we could publish. Um,
Mm,
some of them still need some work. Like I'm looking at some right now and thinking like, oh, that's going to get sent back because we
right.
have a process, right? And if you don't get past, like you get to this edit stage and that's not up to standard, it gets pushed back and they have to redo it according to the instructions that we give them. Um, but it seems that we're getting there, which
Mm,
means that we can increase the speed at which we create content because it's not just a two-person operation.
right. Of course.
Having all that done brings us that one step closer to having units get released on a regular basis quickly.
So that's the long answer of why Phase 2 content isn't coming out yet. Do
Yeah.
we, do we have any sort of idea on when we'll be able to get it to come out soon on a regular
Mm.
basis? I kind of think we don't have a great estimate yet because there are a couple development challenges as well. We have to we have to
Yeah.
um, we have to tweak our current content management platform. Like I was saying earlier, just now we just got it so that we can publish units separately from a phase, which is pretty huge. That was one of the big blockers, but there's a couple other blockers from the development side of
Yeah.
of things as well, from what the content management platform can do, as far as making it a smooth and weekly repeatable process where every week there's more content coming out than the student can keep up with on a 2-year pace. So there's that side of things, and I want to say it's like within the next couple months, but I don't know for sure. There's a lot of variables. By a couple months, I
Yeah.
want to
And
say like I hope we can do it within about 2 months. Right, that'd be my hope. But
yeah.
I don't know
And we're probably not gonna flip a switch where it's like
exactly.
magically
It's gonna
two
like
units per day getting published. It's at first it's gonna
be
be a
like.
couple a week, and then it's gonna be one per day, and then it's gonna be two per day, and it's gonna be more than that per day.
Well, I want to say that's one of the
Um,
issues we've had in the past is we've always been trying to focus on like flipping the switch when things aren't flipping the switch. That's just reality. Like things are a gradient, and so getting our first manageable targets like what you're doing right now. Okay, getting it so that materials, which is like sentence synthesis and things, can be created and be publishable on like on a consistent schedule. That's part of it. And then it's getting it so that the content for units can get written, like the dialogues and the lessons. And then from there, it's okay. Now, how do we get that to be consistent so we can get like 2 units out a week? And then how can we get it so that there's a unit coming out every day of a week? And then how can we get it so that there's 2 units a day coming out, like that kind of a thing. It's going to be this iterative process.
Yeah, and I think the other thing we didn't even mention it here, but the getting stuff like the learning mode finished and a sentence browser available to kind of mess around and learn random things that are not in units.
Yeah.
Um, and just all around involve students more in the language and the materials that we have.
Right.
Because you go to NATIVSHARK and it looks like, yeah, we have phase one and it's 166 units, which is a ton of content for a beginner, especially.
Right.
But it's nothing compared to like what we have sitting
Yeah. You don't
not
have
exposed to
access. Yeah, you
students.
don't have access to the 20,000 some sentence sentences that we have. You know.
Or I was thinking about this morning, and I think we have like 2,000 dialogues written.
2,000 dialogues. It's more than I thought we
Yeah.
had. Wow.
Well, a lot of them they haven't gone through the editing
Okay.
process, but like
But
they've been
still.
written. We have about 500 that are, I would say, the Japanese at least does not need to be changed. Needs audio,
Hmm.
but they're created. Um, and in the past, it's like, oh, we're just sitting on them because there's something in each one of those dialogues that's not taught yet in phase one. So
Right.
it's not getting exposed in the unit. And even if it was, we only have one dialogue per unit right now.
Hmm.
So why aren't we letting students browse all the dialogues we
Right.
have, so that they can get more interaction with the Japanese language, even if it's not in their course studies for that day.
Right. Because we can always bring it
So
into the core studies, in the future, rather than just sitting on it and not making it available to students, which is kind of
yeah,
silly. We could make it available to
or
students, and then, as we were able to get publishing of lessons to be something that's consistent, then we can bring it into those. Some of that stuff will make it into those units, and some of it won't. It'll just be, content that is free floating, as it were, extra credit content in a sense.
yeah, and then or even like say JLPT grammar points, for example.
Hmm.
Uh, there are about 604
Yep.
grammar points to go all the way through N1,
Yep.
from N5 to N1, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we actually have written example sentences for every single one of those. I can actually tell you how many we have,
Hmm.
right? So it's something like looks like 3,000 sentences or so that are just sentences written to explain those grammar points. We have them. They're translated. They're sitting there in our, but they're not exposed to students. Do you know what I mean?
Wait, what was the number again?
So,
Can you say that again?
well, it's this spreadsheet I'm looking at is kind of messy, but it's
Hmm.
somewhere between 2,500 and 3,000. Looks like
All right, with context.
the context isn't written yet, so
Okay.
that's what I mean. Is like, but it's pretty easy to do that because
Right, because with the
because they're
processes you just
JLPT
described. Yeah.
because they're JLPT sentences,
Yeah.
they're going to be textbook formal, textbook casual in most cases.
Right.
Um, which means the context is pretty easy to write because it doesn't have to be that specific to a real world situation, which is kind of ridiculous that like the JLPT sentences are not the ones that are the most useful for being able to speak.
Yeah.
But
It happens that
whatever.
way. Yeah.
But they are helpful to know like what are the rules? How
Right.
does this grammar work? And we do want to we want to offer those sentences
Of course.
to students. They can pass those tests because you can get jobs and stuff when you pass those tests.
Right.
But the fact that we have all those sentences and they're all translated, but they don't have the context yet. But it wouldn't take us that long to finish the context and get the audio. We have audio actually for a lot of them already too. So that's why something like getting a sentence browser released
Right.
sooner than
So then you
later
could
would be.
like add this stuff to your custom decks, and you could filter by tag, for example, filter by N4 or whatever, and then be able to add these to your custom decks. So you can study extra, study alongside your core studies, or if you finished phase one, and that it would give you something to do while the NATIVSHARK core materials are being further developed, right? That's the idea.
Yeah. Well, it's also just this whole idea of extra credit, which like
Yeah, for
we've been
real.
talking about, and it doesn't really exist
Yeah, it'd be a
forever.
great way to get
Um,
like legitimate extra credit in. Like, what can I do when I finish my core studies for the day? Because I felt like, oh, I got it done pretty quickly. Well, here's a lot of
yeah,
sentences you can go through,
because
dialogues
that's
as
a question
well.
we get a lot is like I want to adjust the pace slider sometimes because like today I have a lot of extra time, so I want to study a bunch
Yeah,
of units, and then we're over here wanting to say don't do that because it's going to decrease the likelihood that you're going to study every day next week and next month and 2 months from now,
right,
which is the ultimate goal of Native Shark is to get better every day, not just get better
right,
a lot some days and then not at all many other days. Um, so it would be easier to tell a student, well, you trust me, you don't want to do that. If we could also say, but you could do all this stuff instead, and we just don't have all that stuff exposed to students yet. So
gotcha. Yeah,
getting that stuff out is also a high priority, and it's actually a lot easier than publishing the phase two units. And it just happens by a matter of course that content will be getting created and published while we are working toward publishing tons of phase two units.
right.
So
So they kind of work at the same time.
yeah.
So let's see. There's a couple things people have mentioned in chat while we've been talking. Native Wowza says such an invested process, very cool. That was when we were talking about the 10-step process
Oh.
to like verifying the
Mhm.
validity of content. Then Cinder asked, does that mean at some point units might have more than one dialogue when we were talking about how we have so many dialogues that have been made?
Yeah, that's
Um,
an interesting question.
I'm
I
not
think
sure if
units.
it does mean that.
Yeah, I think students should be able to study more units. I mean, more
More
dialogues.
dialogues,
Sorry.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know if that means they should be in a unit,
Right.
like a lot of them.
I kind of feel like having the one dialogue per unit makes sense because again, like a unit is like, in a sense, it's like the nugget of what you need to do today to progress yourself forward in like the NativeShark core. So we want to keep that as achievable and as impactful as possible. So I'm not sure if it includes adding more dialogues. Maybe it does in later phases, and we don't know yet. But the ability when we were talking about having 3,000 dialogues within the platform, that gets into what we were just saying, which is like this could be used as extra credit content, or we can build small like little quizzes and things that come at different points in the like phase that you could opt into, for example, to be like, hey, you've actually learned every single word in this dialogue, why not go give this a check, if you've got extra time. That sort of extra credit stuff is what we were talking
Yeah.
about using those dialogues for.
Once we have the new CMP done, also, the system should know which dialogues are appropriate for your level at any time so that you would have tons to go through anytime you wanted.
Yeah. Basically what Cinder just said. It would be interesting if the dialogues were tagged or something. Like if I know I'm going to be ordering food at a restaurant, I could listen to dialogues that revolve around that scenario. That's essentially what we want for the extra credit activity of dialogues, shadow loops, etc. Is
Yeah.
you want to be able to go build a custom set to review based on a given tag, so that you can, review that, in parallel with your core studies. And that's, you know, compared to getting phase two units out consistently, that's actually not as hard to do.
Yeah, believe it or not, it's actually a lot
Unfortunately,
easier.
yeah. Um, so definitely we should do that. But even still, like I said, like it is a focus. Like I want everyone to know that we are working on trying to get phase two units out consistently as soon
Yeah.
as we can. Like I think about it literally every day. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about how are we going to do this? Like when can this happen? What can we do? What can we change to make it so that it's
Yeah.
sooner? You
Because
know?
all the stuff we just talked about with dialogues and sentence browser and having all this content that's create like JLPT sentences, having all
Yeah.
this content available to students, we'll do it because it's valuable and
Yep.
it's easier than making units, but it's actually not as important as publishing
No. The
units
most
because
important thing for a student is for us to have the path, the way,
yeah, because
right?
that's what's nice about Native Shark is you don't have to go and look through what should I study and what should I do next? Should I do this? And then you have to go into like a
Exactly.
forum and ask other people, and then
Exactly.
you get opinions from other people that are probably not that great for you, even if they were great for that person.
Yep.
And then you end up thinking a lot about learning the
Yeah.
language instead of actually learning it.
Yep.
So that's why units
Which
are
you should
great because
only
you don't
do.
have to think about
Yes,
it.
which you should only spend that much time thinking about stuff after you've done your units for the day, because then you know you're okay, right? Once you've done your units for the day, it's like you've made it, and now any extra time you spend thinking about what should I do, what should I fill my extra time with, if you have it, is it's fine. You can do whatever you want, but it's which is also why things like extra credit aren't you don't need to do things like that or like custom decks in order to get your streak for the day, because like what we're helping create is like Nico just said, where you don't have to think about what you're going to study. And we just talked about a lot of cool stuff that we're adding for, we want to add for like enhancing the study experience, but all of that requires you as a student to like kind of think about what are you going to do a bit. So it's great. We should do it. We want to support it, but that's why it's not as important to us as phase 2 units, because that's the stuff that it's like we know, students can rely on, essentially, building the true path, as it were.
Yeah.
All right, I think we talked about that question a substantial amount, and let's see if we can't move on to another question. Which, let's see, Cell Talks posted something in Discord. I'm going to read it real quick. Okay, all right. He posted it and he included a screenshot. If you want to look in Native Shark discussion category on Native Shark podcast questions, the Discord, you can see the screenshot he posted. I'm gonna post the question on the stream right now. So for anyone watching the video, they're able to see it. 1 second, and then for audio listeners, I'll read it out as well in a moment here. Right. Because yes, I'm working on getting this podcast to be posted to audio only sources, like iTunes,
Like a podcast normally.
Yeah, like normal podcast. Yeah, we'll get there. All right. Okay, so I just posted it in here, and let me center this. All right, there we go. So the question was, would it be possible to build some sort of grammar/particle reference/dictionary and have it link up to the sentences in the platform? And he included a screenshot where he said, for example, in this sentence, clicking the knee could bring up a reference or open a tab describing uses of that particle. And he showed a picture of one of the sentences where in the literal breakdown you can see the knee particle. And right now, if you hover over it, I believe it only just highlights its position in the sentence itself. But it doesn't link right now. If you click it, it doesn't bring up a like a reference, like a back reference to where was this particle taught, like what use case are we seeing here, and what are other sentences that contain this. So it doesn't do that right now. And if I understand correctly, Celltalk is asking, would it be possible to do that?
Something we wanted to do for a long time.
Yes. And actually I can say that it's like half built into the platform right now. The only, like, I actually you can actually, like, in the custom content management platform right now, you actually can link an individual word to a lesson. And so when you click it, it would say, here's the lesson summary. Do you want to go read this lesson? Essentially, and it'll open in a new tab if you want to read the lesson, but it'll get the lesson summary. Like, that actually works right now. The problem with that is One, it doesn't link to example sentences right now. Um, Two, it's a pain. It's very hard. We built a very
Tons
poor
of work to use.
interface. The current like content management platform, like we've said it a lot, it works barely. It needs a lot of love. Most of our time we spent at the end into getting the student platform, of course, because that's what you all see and interact with, to be functional. When we left our own content management tools to be a lot to be desired, so that they're barely functional. Um, so we actually can do what you're asking about right now, but it's kind of scuffed, and it takes us a long time to do it. So we need to improve that part of it. And then at a minimum, yes, when you click it, it can give you a reference to um, the lesson that taught that grammar point, and then you can go open it in a new tab if you would like. Or we might make it so that it's opens in a modal, so you don't actually have to leave the current lesson. But that part of it kind of works, and it's one of the things like I want to get actually into the platform and make it easy for collaborators like our freelancers to go in and tag all of these things. But we're not quite there yet. And to the second part of your question, can there be a reference in dictionary? And yeah, like that's another part. Like with the sentence browser that we're talking about building, we should also be able to add in like the ability to just do like a general search. So if you search for the knee particle, you can not only can you get all of the sentences and dialogues that use knee particle, but you could also get the lessons that teach the various use cases of knee particle in a search. And we could probably also make it so that you can just like click a single button to tag searches by various common particles. So the combination of those two things, I think, is what you were asking for. And yeah, we wanted it to do that from the start, but it hasn't. And I don't know when it will, but we are working on it. So yeah, yes, would it be possible? It's definitely possible.
Yeah, I think in general, we want more capabilities from clicking on individual pieces of a sentence. You know what I mean? Like you should be able to hover or click any word and see what the kanji are in it with their meanings separately. For example,
Yeah.
um, yeah, you should be able to click a particle and see lessons it's in, sentences it's in. You should be able to click a word and see other sentences that have that word. Um, yeah, all of those things we really want. And we will do them. It's just a matter of prioritizing and getting the work done.
Hmm.
There's interesting issues that arise with something like a particle being linked because we probably have several lessons on a single particle for most of them, maybe
Right.
all of them, but certainly most of them. So then there's the issue of, do we just have links to all the lessons that include that particle, even if it's not the usage in the particular sentence? And if we don't do that, what's the process of training the person who's tagging these so that they know what lesson it should be?
Yeah.
And what happens when they mess it up? Because they will,
Yep.
you know. So there's a few moving parts to make that work properly, but I'm sure we'll get it
Yeah.
done correctly in due time.
I think there's like three versions of it. One where we can get just what exists now to be less of a painful experience to do, so we can get the basic linking in. I think that's the first phase of this existing.
Mhm.
I think the second phase is like when the basic search exists, getting that in so you can reference. And then I think the third phase of it existing is kind of what you just described a little bit, Nico, where it's like it does exactly what you'd expect it to, and it works beautifully. I think that's like the third phase of that existing.
Yeah, and we'd have to figure out a lot of things about that.
For
Like
that final phase of it, there
even
are
if
a lot of things to figure out. Yeah.
yeah, because even if there is only a single lesson that is that usage of that particle, it might still be helpful to at least mention the other lessons that it's taught in that
Yeah.
has other uses of that particle. Because why not? Why not compare the way it's used?
Yep. So yeah, it's a good question though. Definitely appreciate that. Cell Talks said in chat, yes, that's exactly what I was asking. Good interpretation. Thank you. Definitely something I've always wanted for sure. So I get it. Absolutely. Okay. Let's see. Let's see. We got another question here, and it's one from me, and I'm gonna answer. Let me paste it in here, and then I'll read it out for audio listeners. 1 second while I update this stream. All right. Pretty sure you can just see that happen live as I'm pasting stuff in. Feels good. Okay. All right. So the question is, what's the deal with the streaks messing up? This is a question I ask, and I'm gonna try to answer it. But I've noticed this lately. Streaks keep breaking, and it's kind of like, hello, why is that? And it turns out streaks are really difficult to make. Yeah, they're not easy, and largely because of time zones. Actually, just I don't want to get into the discussion on it, but the engineering friends in the chat will understand, and the listeners that computers and time, we don't know what we're doing. Us engineers have made a mess with time zones and computers. Yeah, no one knows what to do. Yeah, insert Tom Scott video. There's a great Tom Scott YouTube video on it. Time zones and computers. So, okay, that number one problem why streaks are troublesome for us is because of time zones and the way that there's a daily reset that you can set as a student. If a student couldn't set it, it would be a lot more simple. But what kind of platform would it be if you couldn't set when you wanted to do reset time to be? That'd be a struggle. So because you that's a feature that you kind of expect. So we have it, and as a result, that functions. The reset time functions, but as a result, it broke some of the way that streaks were working. So that was one of the first streak instability problems that we had, and we got that mostly working. But then we did a performance patch on the front end of the site to make it run a lot. Yeah, what's up, Jay?
Can the audience hear you?
I don't know. Can I be heard? Jay is wondering if I can be heard. Can the stream hear me?
I can certainly hear you, but that's cheating.
Hold on. Stand by.
Or maybe just my headset.
Okay, maybe just okay. We can hear. Okay, Tia said it's just her headphones died. Okay, perfect. Okay, good. You can hear me. All right. So back to what I was saying. Yeah. So when we did our performance update to speed up, it was like a massive speed increase. In some cases, we were getting page times loading 100 times faster than they were. So that update, it brought in some unexpected instability with streaks, and we weren't entirely sure why. But last week, Jacob managed to figure it out. But at the same time, we also brought in Streak Saver as like a silent thing that slipped right in. I don't think we've run the script yet to repair anyone's streaks who had a 1 day gap for the past since I've been a subscriber. I don't think that's run yet, but Streak Saver itself actually exists now to wherein if you study 2 days in a row and you miss the third day basically says, oh, if you study on the fourth day, third day skip doesn't happen. That's in now. When that got brought in, it ended up making some streaks go negative for reasons that are unknown. However, most of those things are now working on the staging site, but Jacob, who publishes the updates, pushes them live, makes sure that they're good to go after they've gone through some testing process. He's moving to Japan right now. He's on the plane, so we can't push this update until
somewhere over the
Pacific Ocean right now. So we're not pushing this update until Thursday or Friday of this week, and it's Wednesday today. So basically, it's felt like there's been this week and a half of lag time where streaks sometimes they're working and sometimes it feels like they're not working. And overall, it's an unlucky time. So that's why streaks have been a problem, largely because of time zones, and then also to try to get Streak Saver working, that brought in some other instability around streaks. That said, getting streaks to be stable is actually one of our highest priorities because it's really unlucky to feel like you don't know what's happening with your streak. That, and then getting the review process and the learning new content, learning new material process to be very smooth, very crisp. That's what we're currently working on. Should be within the next 2 weeks that these kind of things will be in the past. Hopefully once and for all with streaks. So that's the streak question. All right. What other kinds of... It's a good answer to a good question. Thank you, Native Wasa. Let's see. Any of these other topics you would like to talk about, Niko, from our list?
I see one of them is why teach in source language? Everything is in English. Didn't we talk about that in the last episode?
I feel like we might have. Yeah, we did talk about that. Maybe that might have been like a carryover from last week. Just quickly, teaching in the source language improves your acquisition because you're able to understand the language that the explanation is being written in. So it makes, when you focus on the target language in the example sentences and in your like immersion, it makes it easier to comprehend because you read the explanation, or you had the explanation given to you in a language that you're familiar with. That's the very short answer on why teach in source language. It's actually really beneficial.
I think some of the concern that comes from students when they ask that kind of thing is just it's insecurity that they're going to learn the language, so they feel rushed to get exposed to lots of Japanese as quickly as possible. And I'm not blaming students for feeling that way. I think it's a pretty natural way to feel. And part of it is our fault that we haven't yet earned the reputation to be able to say, like, what are you worried about? Just look at all the other students who did it with NATIVSHARK, and it's fine. Because obviously we have to have our students go through all our content before we can start saying that.
Right.
Because the most difficult part of learning a language of learning Japanese is not kanji, it's not vocab or grammar or the amount of English or Japanese you have in a lesson. It's the voice in your head telling you that you're wasting your time and you should just give up now.
Yeah.
So, but if NATIVSHARK is not helping you to quiet that voice in your mind, then it needs to improve, I think. So, I'm not just saying like students are wrong.
Yeah,
like,
me either. Definitely not. I mean, I know what it feels like. One time earlier on in my studies, I bought a bunch of quote unquote intermediate textbooks that were fully in Japanese. I was like, this is gonna make me fluent. This is gonna make me better in Japanese. I've probably been studying for like
all the things.
I've probably been studying for like under a year, and I was like, I'm gonna do this, and this is gonna make my studies better. So I bought, I don't know, several. I went through like half of one of them. They never finished the other ones. The best part about those textbooks was actually when I gave them to Chie, and she just read the dialogues to me, and then I practiced the dialogues. I ignored the rest of the textbook, and I only did that for one of them because I just didn't have the I don't know, I guess the patience to keep doing it. But yeah, I want to say that was the best benefit I got from it was the dialogues being read to me and then me reading the dialogues back. But the grammar explanations, like, I was a year into my studies, I couldn't actually understand them, very, very well. Like, I could read it, but I didn't feel like it was sticking. So yeah, I totally get the motivation to want to do it, and I think that sometimes it could be effective, but it comes back to it's not necessary. And then dialogues, hey, that's what we have at the end of our units. Like, that was the most powerful thing about it, and that's, we have those. We have the native audio with the dialogues. Which is really great to be able to listen to. Like they're so powerful. Um, yeah. So I don't want to get too far into that question again because I think we did talk about it
No,
last week.
we will go down a rabbit hole
Yeah,
if we talk too much
we'll
about
go in circles. We got to clip this section and clip last week's section and put them together in like a video, and then we can just reference that video, put it on YouTube.
it. There you
That's
go.
the video where we talked about that. I said we should do that. That'd be smart. Okay, here's a question. Talk about some short-term solutions for level check mode. That's something that I was thinking about. I think it was from that Reddit post that you posted a question to, and it made me think about. Someone commented something, and then I responded to it, and I was like, "Yeah, that's a good idea." And it made me think of a way that we could, what could can we brainstorm some short-term solutions for level check mode and for like, supplementary, like quizzes, I guess. We talk about that a little bit.
Okay, what is a short-term solution for level check mode?
I think a short-term solution for level check mode is essentially making it so that as a student, you can basically okay, well, there's two parts to it. One is the part where we can basically build a short quiz that asks you a question like, do you know hiragana? Like, yes, and then it just does like a couple questions just to make sure that okay, you can read these. Cool. So then you click yes on that, and then the hiragana are archived. It's like, do you know katakana? And then you ask you a couple questions, and then you can decide if yes I do or no I want to have those into my beginning of my studies. And then from there it's like do you know travel Japanese? And then we ask you some questions, and it basically tries to roughly with short questions it tries to roughly like essentially archive some of the units but not all of the units, and then you as a student have the ability to archive units of your choice. We basically build an index. We say these are the topics taught, kind of like what our summaries do, but a little bit more index form. And then you can like archive some of them to say, yeah, these ones I don't want to cover. And then we just give you like a warning, hey, if you want to do this, like we can't verify that you're gonna know everything in here. But this is what like that's an option that I was thinking of that we could. How could we get some form of getting that kind of a thing in. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that could work. I think the answer is not like choose what phase to start at.
Right, that's the thing. That's not that's not the answer to the question. It's more like selectively not having some of the units available, because just like blanket saying what phase, that doesn't work. We know that doesn't work.
Yeah, well, for that to work, we would have to follow other people's definition of levels, like beginner, intermediate, advanced. Internally, just if anyone's curious, we refer to phase 1 as going from absolute beginner to beginner. So you are a beginner at the beginning of phase 2.
Yeah.
Finishing phase 2 would take you from beginner to intermediate.
From the end of phase 2.
Yeah. So like at the end of phase 2, which will be at least double the length of phase 1.
Right. It's like
you would be able to say you're intermediate. And intermediate, the word intermediate here is the word fluent that people use a lot. Because it means functional fluency. It's like you're able to do all the things that you want to do. Like you can go function with make friends and understand basic stuff. Like if you hear a polyglot that speaks 8 languages and they say they speak Japanese, I would be shocked if it was past phase 2 level.
For sure. That's a good way to put it.
So yeah, we can't really say like pick your phase, because if we do that, we can't have.
Right.
It just wouldn't match a lot, and then there's students have different ideas about what their level is. You might have 2 students both saying they're intermediate, and one of them is twice as good as the other one. There's also that graph that Ty always posts where it's like,
Yeah.
the better you get at Japanese, the worse you feel you are at the language.
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, to address that, like no matter like level check mode in general is always gonna have to be smart enough. Like the ultimate version of it is gonna have to be smart enough to like, you know, understand the student's knowledge graph, like what do they know, and then place you relatively speaking like a relative phase position, but there's probably going to be stuff from earlier phases that's at the beginning of your like your queue that you should cover before getting into your relative position in the phase. But for the short term, we could ask basic questions that can essentially archive specific units, and then allow the student themselves to archive units if they want to in advance. I think that might work. Of course, we'd have to develop that, which would take time. But I just wanted to talk about it a bit. All right.
I got a question.
Yeah, the one from One Trick Try Hard. Do you want to read that one, Niko?
I'm currently on a streak of around 50 days, something I'm proud of. However, I feel I'm stagnating slightly as I often just review my flashcards each day to maintain my streak, but I'm not really making steps and tackling new lessons that frequently. Thoughts? My first thought is that I do the same thing.
All right, I called this question "Feelings of Stagnation Reveal Only Days." Except thoughts. Well, my first response is streak of 50 days is impressive. Like a consistent 50 days. Wow.
Yeah.
Like actually congrats. That's huge.
Reading that, I kind of wonder if so we have the unit primer. It's the thing that shows at the beginning of a unit. It's like you're going to see this lesson and these kanji and these vocab. And we do that just because scientifically it's shown that you're more likely to do better at learning if you have an idea of what you're about to learn before you learn it.
Right.
So it's more effective form of education. But I kind of wonder now if maybe when you hit the smiley face on that last review card, if it should just take you into the next lesson. So that you don't have that point where you can say, yeah, I'll come back later and do it. Maybe I don't feel like doing this whole unit right now. Because on the one hand, we have this, science shows that this is a more effective way to teach someone.
Right.
But if it's getting people to not do their unit as often, maybe it's not as effective.
I don't know if it's the separation, like they finish their reviews and then it says
that's what I mean.
Unit,
like it's so separate. It's like you're done reviewing. Here's the new unit.
Thing. Because on one hand, we've wanted to build it like that because we wanted to emphasize to people that just maintaining your streak, doing reviews, is making progress. Like keeping that streak going, continuing your reviews, is a certain set of progress. So like keeping them separate does have that benefit where it's like, okay, I know I can manage at least reviews, so I'm still making progress. If we blend them together so much you don't even know the difference between when you start to reviews and when you started a new unit, I don't know if that's necessarily better or not. That is a difficult.
Yeah, in my own case, I think I probably would read the lessons pretty much every day if it did just drop me into them as soon as my flashcards were done.
So then,
that's an interesting question.
Cinder asked to One Trick's question. Do you find that you are not doing new lessons because you don't have the time or because you don't feel prepared to move forward? And the response was, I think it's a mix of both. I often do it at night, maybe not prioritizing it enough. I have around 70 to 120 flashcards a day, tackling 2 to 3 lessons a week. I mean, on one hand, 2 to 3 lessons a week is quite a bit. Like, depending on how busy you are.
Pretty good.
That's actually pretty good. Depending on how busy you are. Like, don't feel bad about that. But 70 to 120 flashcards, I can understand how that could be tiring. We usually want to see people's flashcards around 40 or less in a given day.
Yeah, that's too many for that many lessons, I think.
Yep.
And you're probably being too hard on yourself with the answers, I would guess.
That would be my guess. Also, again, I feel like this is somehow, I mean, I don't know the solution because SRS does not. This is what him having or this person having, them having 70 to 120 flashcards, 70 to 120 flashcards. Like that is what SRS will do to you essentially. That's what it does. So how do we?
That's what it's
This is the
built to do.
question,
Yeah.
right? That's what they're built to do. This is the question that we're constantly needing to iterate on, and coordinate with the feedback from our community, and do more reading on ourselves into the scientific literature on it, and stuff. Because how do we make the platform so that it combats the negatives of an SRS? Like that's hard.
Yeah, because SRS is it's Moroha no Tsurugi. It's what double-edged sword.
Double-edged
That's what
sword.
it is.
Yep.
I'm gonna type it in case anyone's curious about idioms.
Yeah, it's a good idiom. It's a good idiom. You want to read that one again real quick?
Moroha no Tsurugi.
Yeah.
So Moroha is like double-edged, I guess. Yeah, and then Tsurugi is sword, which you would know if you played RPGs in Japanese.
Yeah, or if you watch Thai streams.
Oh yeah, he probably has taught it
I'm
before in the
sure.
streams.
Yeah. So, yes, on that note, like an SRS is a fantastic tool, but it's a double-edged sword. Like, on one hand, it helps you memorize and learn things over a period of time. The other hand, it can become overwhelming and cause you to stop. And we've talked about this on the podcast. I think both episodes where flashcards, there's happy flashcards and there's sad flashcards, right? They can be really good or they can be really negative and cause you to feel stagnated, and that's understandable. We get that, and so we want to continue to. So getting this feedback, like what you're providing us now in our chat, is really beneficial. It gives us more data to think about and discuss on how we're going to continue to tweak the flashcard, continue to tweak the review experience with the platform so that people are getting a consistent like 40 to 50 or less flashcards a day, because they should be quick, and they should be a nice like refresher of your currently working on knowledge. Like I've said in the past, like SRS flashcards are best used when they're ephemeral. Like they're not these things that hang on to you for the next 5 years of your life, and they're not things that you're constantly worried about whether or not you're remembering or you're forgetting. You're just trusting in the system to work over time. And this means some days you're not going to remember a card completely, but you don't have to click like I forgot. You can instead click, like in our case, the meh face or the smiley face, just to get it to move forward into the future, because in that exact moment your brain might not have remembered that information for whatever reason. It could be the context, could be because you ate something weird for lunch that day. It doesn't mean that you don't actually know that information if you've seen it before, and because it's an SRS you will see it again. So always go into the I don't know it, I'm not, it's like the natural tendency of our minds. I've done this so many times myself where I forgot it, and then next day I've had 1,000 reviews. That didn't help me. It would have been better if I had just clicked meh or like smile face and just trusted to have seen it again in the future, and then that time I might remember it, because that's happened before too, where it's like I didn't remember it at all, but then the next time I did see it again, and I did remember it, and I didn't actually click the I forgot interval. So it's like, how do we create messaging in the platform to help students understand this? And then how do we design and develop the algorithm itself to account for this? And then how do we make the user experience, like the buttons and choices, help students to know which answer to pick? Like those are the three things that we're dealing with. To fully answer this question, that's what we're dealing with. But in the short term, how to deal with it is like, don't be so hard on yourself. It's okay. Especially like you just said, you've gone for 50 days and you're tackling 2 to 3 lessons a week. Like that's crazy. That's Japanese that you wouldn't have learned if you weren't studying with NATIVSHARK every single day, that you are learning. That's progress into the language that you have chosen to study. Like that's amazing. I think celebrate that fact, and don't be too hard on yourself. Like it's so easy to do, but not necessary.
I sometimes joke with Caleb that once we have all 4 units out, I want to find a student and sponsor their studies and have them go through all of the units and do no flashcards. Just archive every flashcard that shows up.
Yeah.
And see what happens, because I suspect they would be fine.
Yeah.
But the reason we're not going to tell students to do that, because there's a bunch of reasons.
Yeah.
Because people have different brains, and people will get stressed out if they don't remember anything a lot of times. And
Yeah.
flashcards are really, really helpful, and I used them a lot when I was learning Japanese.
Right.
But I do suspect that we give them more credit than they deserve,
I think so.
because
Because we feel like it's a thing that's going to save us, right? Because we don't believe ourselves
yeah,
that we can learn the language, and we feel like this thing is going to be the thing that helps me. When,
well, it's measurable,
yeah,
and
exactly.
your stuff going on in your brain is not.
Yeah.
So you see a word like a vocab card in a flashcard, and you feel like you don't remember it really,
Mm,
but you might actually understand that word if you saw it in a different context.
exactly.
And the different context is the real world where you're actually interacting with the language. And so
Right.
that's what you were trying to prepare for. And so it's this difficult thing of, do I know this well enough to not be completely lost when I'm interacting with the actual language in the real
Mm,
world? And it's difficult to measure. So I think there's always going to be the kind of this fuzzy gray area of like, what do I do with my cards? What do I
yeah.
rate them? And that's the design challenge that Caleb was talking about. And yeah, I see in your comment that you said that you do the smiley only if you can get the meaning and remember the readings. And I think just the meaning is fine.
Yeah, definitely. I was going to comment on that. If you can remember just the meaning, that's fine. I would click smiley on that, honestly, because you'll see it again, you know? And you'll see it, not only you see it again in the flashcards themselves, but you'll see it again, you'll see that word or that character again in another lesson. You'll see it again in another sentence. You'll see it again in another dialogue. You'll see it again when you're watching an anime and you have the Japanese subtitles on. You'll see it again when you're reading the manga. You'll see it again when you're emailing or texting a friend. You know what I mean? Like the more you use integrate Japanese into your life, like you don't have to like consume Japanese media if that's not your thing, but just like talking with your friends or your coworkers if you have a job that uses Japanese, like whatever it might be, you'll see that word again then, right? And that time you might remember it, or maybe you won't. That's okay too. But that's another point of exposure, and it'll show up again in your. If you keep doing your studies consistently, you'll see it again in your cards again, right? And this is another thing where I can't wait until the study archive exists, because then let's say you did speed through something. You felt like you sped through some cards, and maybe they got more mature than you thought they should be. You ran into them in real life, and you really had no idea what was going on. Okay, with Native Shark, the study archive, you should be able to search that word again, and then essentially bring that card back to the front if you really want to. And I can't wait till that exists. It'll exist sometime. But when it does, then we really like this problem doesn't hardly exist anymore, because when we really can say no, go ahead, because you can go and change it in the future if you run into it in real life and you actually forgot it. Go back, reset the card, no problems, right? But since that doesn't exist yet, I can't quite say that. Even though that's what I want to say to people, to do that right now. I understand why people are hesitant to do that, because they can't undo it easily. Like you can technically go in and check your browse settings and like go see if something's been archived, and you can unarchive it. But if it wasn't archived yet, then you can't like go change this interval. You can't bring it right to the front yet. You need to be able to do that, and we will make it so that you can do that.
Yeah, another interesting thing about this, doing the
But
smiley, if
yeah,
you get the meaning, you remember the readings. If you go into your study settings, you'll notice that there is an option for audio to play on the front of a card,
yeah,
which would mean not getting tested at all on your ability to read the readings.
yep,
Um, and we did not include that option lightly. In fact, initially I wanted the audio to be on the front by default. And I even
yeah.
talked about
I
possibly
remember that.
forcing it on students. And we went back and forth on it a lot.
Yeah,
And I've gone back and forth on it a lot. I did maybe the first like 15,000 flashcards I ever did had no audio ever at all. So I got really good at reading, less good at pronouncing things. Whereas when I study most languages now, I always put audio on the front because it makes the cards easier. So I'm more likely to do them quickly, which means I'm more likely to do them every day, which means I'm less likely to quit. So
exactly.
that's why I put audio on the front now. Um, but if I'm feeling like, oh man, I suck at reading, I might switch the audio back to the back and for a little while. But if I feel like I'm having trouble doing my studies every day, I think it's better to have the audio on the front because it makes the flashcards
Right.
easier, which you can do 'em
Here's one of the
faster.
things that you're just kind of like you're hitting on it a little bit, but I just want to say it, and it's something that we need the platform to do better. Itself is the consistency is the key, right? It's the keeping with it that matters. It's the doing things that will make it so that you don't give up. That's what's more important than being so hard on ourselves or so specific in particular the way we answer like flashcards of all things. It's like those micro choices can be what add up to you quitting. And if you quit, if you stop, then you're not going to reach your goal, right? You're not going to be fluent in Japanese. But if you
Doesn't matter
don't,
if you do that.
it doesn't matter how fast or how slow you did it. If you quit, you're not going to do it, right? So that's the thing. The overwhelming thing that has to be thought of as important in the student's mind is what can I do to not quit? Because it doesn't matter. Like we always want to do things really quickly. I'm like the worst at this. I always want things now. It's a horrible thing that I struggle with, and I've been dealing with it for like my whole life. And to this day, I'm getting better at it, especially through building NATIVSHARK and talking with lots of students and seeing how many other people struggle with this. But it's a thing we have to fight against. It's like it's about not giving up that matters, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how long it takes, because if you quit, that's it. But if you can do something to keep yourself going, even it takes you 10 years, you can reach your goal if you don't actually quit. And then if it took 10 years, then you can speak Japanese. And that'd be better than in 10 years from now not being able to speak Japanese, right? So like you got to think about it like that sometimes. I don't know. I'm passionate about it because like I want students to reach, I want them to be successful, and not quitting is the biggest thing. So again, that's why when we got the question here in the Twitch chat about they've been saying they had a 50-day streak. I was like, that's actually amazing. That is the most important thing. You are doing it right already, that you've been able to keep it going for that long. So feel free to, reduce things a little bit so that you can keep that momentum. That's the gem, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got a breath.
Yeah,
I see also said I had never thought about having the audio on the front like that. That's really interesting. And I realized one other thing I didn't mention was
Oh yeah, go ahead.
another reason I often do audio on the front is because I like to close my eyes when I do flashcards.
I talked about that once.
That's
Just
not
close
for
your eyes.
any great reason other than that my eyes are tired at the end of the day.
That's
because
funny.
I spend a lot of time looking at screens for work all day, every day, and I don't really feel like looking at a screen when I'm not working, be it in the morning or in the evening. So I like to not be staring at words and trying to not have my vision be completely destroyed by technology. So
I understand.
that's another reason I like the audio on the front.
That's funny.
Going back. Yeah, go ahead.
I close my eyes on flashcards, did listen to audio in the front sometimes because I just sometimes prefer to study with my eyes closed, like you said, or because I'm specifically trying to work on like auditory explanation and I don't really care about whether or not I can read it, because like for me, this is a personal thing. I don't think this is true of all people, but it's pretty easy to remember or to learn to read things just by like being exposed to them over time and seeing it, whatever. It's pretty easy for me to do, but the auditory part, to make sure that I can like understand it when it's spoken to me, that has been more difficult. So closing my eyes during flashcards, and then just clicking the smile face or the meh face is actually a very effective strategy that I've used personally as well, for that reason.
Yeah, Josh says let's have an audio only mode for flashcard front sides. I don't want to do that, but I think that could be an activity or something. I don't think it's good for course studies for a couple reasons.
Right.
One is that if the written stuff is on the front of the card and you don't look at it and you do have the audio on the front also, then it's actually a 3-step process you're doing, because you can listen, and if you didn't catch it, you could just look at it, and then maybe then you got it, and then you look at the back and see what it meant. So it's like, oh, well, you just make the audio cards 3 steps where you can the first time you click it shows you the sentence. The second time you click it shows you the answer. But then now we've increased the steps, and flashcards are taking even longer to do, and it's more tapping and more doing stuff.
And so it's less likely for you to, it's those micro choices you have to make that make it less likely for you to ultimately complete your studies, less likely for you to ultimately reach your goal. So we want to keep those at a minimum.
I made flashcards like that, and then I ended up not doing them because they took forever. I felt like they took forever, even if they maybe only took a few extra minutes.
Yeah. That
But I think
said, I
audio
want to say like an audio only activity, 100% I want to do, and I want it to be related to, like, I think I mentioned this before, maybe not on the podcast, about um, building custom shadow loops from the results of your review session. That would be an audio only activity. That's a direct um, correlation to how you did in your review studies. Make that as an extra credit activity. That's what I want. That's a full audio activity, and it's related to what I just studied. That sounds perfect to me. um,
Hmm.
I do want to say
Yeah, going.
as well, real quick, on the audio flashcards, like being on the front. Like Niko said, he wanted to at first maybe make it like that way for everyone, but then again, through deliberation and talking about it, we instead made it an option for the student to decide, but not the default for some of the reasons that Niko just talked about.
Yeah,
But
well, because
yeah, you
if
can
you're like
toggle
me,
it.
you end up doing it all the time. You don't look at your screen ever. You might end up being pretty bad at reading stuff.
Exactly.
Uh,
So there's a balance, right?
yeah. I mean, if you look at the screen, then you'd probably be fine. But I don't like to look at the screen even, so I find it does hurt my reading ability if I only do that.
Yeah.
One last thing I wanted to mention about this whole like maintaining a consistent pace and not trying to do too much at once in the beginning is I'm repeatedly put to shame by a day with this because I taught her how to use SRS and stuff like in
Yeah.
2014 maybe, like a long time ago. And she's so much more level-headed than me. Like when I want to learn a new language, like I don't want to wait forever to learn a language, so I'll try to do like 30 new vocab a day or something.
Yeah.
Because I was able to do that with Japanese because I was obsessed with it
And
and
you
I
had
was
a
learning
ton
it.
of time for it.
Well, I mean, I did quit and start a bunch of times.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I would recommend the way I went about it, but sometimes I was able to maintain that pace for a little while. So I feel like I should be capable of doing it because
Yeah.
I've done it before, at least for a little while. So I go in here, I'm like, I'm gonna learn Korean or Chinese. I'm gonna learn 30 words a day. And if anyone that's done SRS with 30 new cards a day should know that after a couple of weeks, you're in trouble.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It is possible to do, but it's really hard to do long term. I've never done it long term before. And then I'm sitting next to a day who does like she'll do 3 to 5 new words a day in flashcards. Okay, and now it's been 7 years or whatever, and she still does 5 new words a day for English.
Yep.
And I am not learning any words in all those other languages that are not Japanese.
Yep.
I'm just waiting for Native Shark now because I can just click the next button and I'll be fine.
Yeah. Click study now. You'll be fine. Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many times over the years I've just seen her doing her flashcards and thought, if only I had just done a few words a day,
Yeah.
starting all those years ago, like I would know a bunch of it now. I would have been pretty good.
Yep.
Like I would be reading whatever the Japanese or not Japanese, I guess whatever like the Korean equivalent is of Gone with the Wind in Korean. Like she's
Yeah.
reading books from like the early 1900s in English for
That's
fun.
crazy. Yeah.
Um,
And 6 years ago, she could hardly do anything in English.
oh no, she met my parents and they
Yeah.
couldn't talk to each other at all.
Yeah.
Zero.
I think the first time I met her was like 2016, and she couldn't hardly speak English. I remember it.
Yeah.
2016, 2017, 2016. But yeah, that's what I was just saying too, where it's like, even if it takes
The
you 10 years,
consistency thing,
the
man.
consistency, even if it takes you 10 years, at least you did it. At least you stuck with it. So that's why keeping things consistent, keeping things manageable, reducing things that might make you quit, that's what's important. So
Yeah, I'm a really impulsive person and I'm really impatient. So I know that like it makes sense when people say it, but it's pretty hard to actually internalize it and do it. A lot of times I'll just go back to the fact that like the time is going to pass. You know, there's going to be a day that's 10 years from now. And if I'm lucky enough to be around and healthy at that date, I bet you I still want to know Korean.
Yeah, probably.
Um, and it would be a lot better if I didn't burn out before that, so that I'm still, so I'm able to do it.
Yeah,
Because you get this idea in your head, like, I want to learn it now. I want to be fluent next year or in 2 years from now. I'm not going to wait 10 years.
right.
But what if that decision costs you the ability to know the language 10 years from now? Because 10 years are going to pass. It's going to happen. Like, life goes by.
Yep.
Um, and I think we have a lot of impulses as humans.
Yeah, especially if your name is
And
Niko or Caleb.
and we sabotage ourselves a lot with these kinds of
Yeah.
things. I do, for certain.
So that's why we're building technology to help compensate for all of that.
We're trying to unsabotage ourselves.
Ourselves, yes.
I'm just not studying any languages until we have them on NATIVSHARK, other than
Same,
from now on.
same. So I wanted to read a couple of these. One chick said, "Thank you for the encouragement. And you're welcome. Stop by anytime." And then Josh said, when we were talking about flashcards, he said, "Wow, that's going to change everything for me. The more I listen to this podcast and the more you talked about this, the more forgiving I am with myself with flashcards," which is really great to hear. And again, like I said, I want to make the platform itself. I don't have the answer for how to do that today, but I want to make the platform itself also be able to give you that feeling where it helps you to understand that you should be and can be very forgiving with yourself with flashcards. And that's honestly part of success. Keeping things manageable, keeping things small, but just spaced over a period of time.
A theme over the last couple of months internally with our team at NATIVSHARK has been that we think our messaging is not very good, because listening to Caleb and I talk on this podcast, it should all feel like old news if the platform's doing its job. We should not seem to be saying something new or that has not been known by using NATIVSHARK. So that's something we're really focused on fixing.
Yeah. Nicholas, have you considered learning Mandarin, making use of that nice character crossover with traditional?
I have, but I'm going to learn Korean first, because we visit with our Korean family at least once a year for a couple weeks. They either come to Tokyo or we go there, and I am ashamed
that you can't speak to your relatives.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and then my nieces and nephews are getting older, and I used to be able to trick them into thinking I knew Korean with like my little phrases here and there.
Right.
But they found out I was a fraud.
They're privy.
They figured it out. They were like, it was like the third day we were there, and my niece, who was like 6 or something, asked her mom. She was like, "Does he speak Korean?"
And she was like,
she got me.
That hurts.
That's why Korean is a priority for me, because
yeah,
it's nice to be able to say thank you and stuff to all these family members who are really nice to me, but it would be a lot better to be able to just talk to them about life.
Yep.
Mandarin sounds fun though, and I'm sure I'll get to it.
But yeah, when we can have NATIVSHARK teach Mandarin, I'm sure that you will study it.
Yeah, interestingly, knowing kanji makes learning Korean a lot easier.
It does, yeah.
Because this is something I want to do when we teach Korean, is have hanja somehow accessible. Hanja is basically kanji of Korean, and they don't use it anymore, but it exists.
Do you know when they stopped using it? Do you have any idea?
I knew, but I don't remember off the top of my head. It was relatively recent history, like in the last couple hundred years. And if you look up the hanja, and if you know Japanese, first of all, and you look up the hanja of a lot of Korean words, they make sense immediately, because you can read the kanji, and it might be an almost identical word in Japanese sometimes, a lot of the time.
Right.
So
not only that, but there's a lot
knowing Japanese is going to help me learn Korean if NATIVSHARK exists, because most learning materials, they don't teach you hanja. You have to search high and low for a dictionary that even has hanja for the words.
Right. But what I was going to add on to that is that not only is that one of the advantages from learning Korean from Japanese, but also there's a lot of shared vocabulary or similar words, and the grammar structure is nearly identical. Um, like the
Yeah.
part, like including the way that particles are used, and the way that suffixes and prefixes are used. Um, there's a lot of similarities. I don't think they're in the same language family technically because of the way that Japanese is kind of a mystery. Um, but they've been in contact for like the past thousands of years. The two islands have, so there's a ton of overlap between the two languages. And then because, like you mentioned, the influence from China with the characters that both of the languages used in the past, um, there's that
Hmm.
benefit as well. So there's a lot of benefits, and, and I don't know, makes it a little bit easier, I guess you could say, of learning Korean once you know Japanese, going from Japanese to Korean. Um,
Yeah. The example I go back to with that Hanja thing is that we eat a lot of Korean food because Ray's mom's Korean and she makes it for us, and then we go to Korea as much as we can to see family. And I kept forgetting. I always forget the names of these Korean dishes because they all sounded the same to me. Like there's like japchae and jjajangmyeon, and they always start with J's and ch everything. And then I kept forgetting what japchae is. It's like this glass noodles dish with
yeah,
vegetables.
I do know what you're
And
talking about.
and
It's
then I
delicious.
mentioned to Bay once, like, oh, I always forget what it's called. And she's like, why? It's sasai. And you look up the hanja, and it's literally the kanji are mixed vegetables. Um,
Yeah,
and if you were able to read those kanji in Japanese, it would be zasai, which sounds kind of like japchae because they don't have the Z sound in Korean. It becomes a J sound. Like Ray's mom sometimes accidentally says things like reijoko instead of reizoko, like refrigerator, because the Z sound is
uh,
kind of hard for her.
yeah, yeah,
So zasai is japchae, right? It makes sense.
it does.
Um, the weird thing is that this goes back to the whole kanji learning thing and people being really worried about kanji, is the hanja for japchae, like the mixed one, is not a general use kanji, and I don't know it, but it looks really similar to the kanji that means miscellaneous, like zatsu.
Yeah.
Um, and the first time I saw it, I didn't even notice it was different because like the right side is the same and the bottom left is the tree, but with the kanji for zatsu, like miscellaneous, the top left is 9, like the number 9, and then for um, japchae, it's like the hat with 2 people. So I didn't notice that the first time I saw it because I don't look at kanji like by every individual little stroke. I just glanced over the kanji. I was like, oh, that's like mixed vegetables. Technically, I was misreading the kanji, but it was similar enough to the other one in both meaning and strokes that it made sense to me.
Yeah, yeah.
Goes back to this thing of obsessing over like little things with kanji.
Yeah, but we've talked about that and we can talk about it again. Right now we're talking about learning Korean.
Yeah, well, this is going to happen a ton too if we ever teach, or when we teach, various forms of Chinese, as they mentioned, because they're simplified, and then there's the traditional characters, and they both have differences with some words, but a lot of the time it just makes total sense if you know Japanese kanji already.
Let's see. Josh is saying, in Korean, are the vowels the same though? I had a go learning Hangul from YouTube vids last month, and some of the vowels and even consonants sounded so similar, and it really confused me. Some are the same, or very similar, but there's I want to say I'm not the one learning Korean, but I believe there's more consonant sounds. There's more, and I think there's more vowels in Korean than there is in Japanese because there's only 5. There's a couple but 5 true vowels in Japanese. What about Korean?
Okay, yeah, it's more, the vowels in Korean are more difficult than the ones in
Okay.
Japanese.
Yeah.
Because like you said, they're kind of similar sounding for a few of them. And I shouldn't say what they are because I'm not a native speaker,
Right.
and a native Korean speaker is going to watch this and be like, "What is he talking about?"
Yeah.
But there's like, there's like
What's this
and there's
guy?
oh, and then there's ooh. And you notice this if you're around Korean people, you notice them like or like pursing their lips a lot when they talk. Oh, like,
Yeah,
ooh.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
and like I watch my family do that, and I think, oh man, no wonder I suck at speaking Korean. I don't do that with my lips when I talk.
Yeah, that's a big thing, man, about learning other
Yeah.
languages. Is you've got to gotta learn to like your face has to learn new muscle movements. It's hard.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is another thing that I want to that we kind of got lucky with Japanese. That it's less of an issue, but that we'll need to figure out is
Mm,
teaching like mouth movements for difficult to pronounce languages. Um, because I've never seen it done well ever. Like they have the videos where it's like a person's mouth, and
yeah, it's a
it
struggle.
is so boring to watch. Though they have the diagrams of where your mouth should be, and it just I
It's one of
don't know
those
what
things that we were just talking about
how to
where it makes you want to give up.
yeah.
So we got to find a way to teach that kind of stuff in a way that doesn't make you want to give up learning the language.
Yeah,
That's the
and that
challenge.
makes sense and it's simple because I'm sure it could be done.
Yeah, I'm sure too. Um, Another little thing here, just to answer, although it was linked, but one trick asked, did I see something about Native Shark at some point branching out to other languages? That'd be so exciting. I often show my friends the platform, but they're mostly trying to learn other languages like Spanish and Korean. Is Native Shark going to teach those in the future? Josh linked our update from last month, which we talked about it, but I'll just say it. Yes, that's our dream, and
Yeah.
specifically Korean and Japanese.
Yeah.
Sorry, Korean and Spanish are specifically the two that we are working on supporting next. I would like to have them have support for a phase 1 of Korean and Spanish sometime in 2021, even if that means December of 2021. But I want it to happen in 2021 at some point. Um, but yeah, so definitely, absolutely.
Yeah. Earlier in this episode, we talked a lot about the stages of content production that lead up to units in phases getting published quickly. And just as kind of like a teaser, it's going to happen the same for other language directions. So, and students will be more involved earlier. So there is a chance that there will be a sentence browser with native shark quality sentences for those other languages you want to learn before the phases are released.
Right.
But I can say no more.
Yeah. But to answer the question, yes, absolutely, we want to do that. It's like as far as priority of development goes, it's less of a priority than getting consistent schedule of phase 2 content and beyond to come out. Again, before we're like actively working on publishing phase 1 or whatever of Korean or Spanish, we want to have um, new units coming out every week faster than any student could catch up with on a 2-year pace.
Yeah.
That's the goal of development. We're trying to wrap
Yeah,
our brains to make that happen.
we're not going to do anything with other
Yeah.
languages unless we're getting enough content released for Japanese for no one to be able to.
Right.
Also, we're just not going to do stuff with other content if it's going to slow down Japanese because
Right.
obviously it's our number one priority.
So yes, that. But we believe that we can get that solved within the next 6 months or so, which leaves the rest of 2021 to get it so where we can have a phase 1 of Korean and Spanish by at least December. Like, okay, maybe it'll be sooner than that, but I don't know. But that's like my dream, is that this time next year we're able to talk about how we're having phase 1 of Korean and Spanish. Again, just like with learning the language, which we've been talking about for the past like 45 minutes, building a company like what we're doing is something that takes time. Like, we want to give all the stuff to you guys immediately, right now, but we just don't have the capacity to be able to do that, and we have to find ways to build our business sustainably. So it's going to take time. I don't know the steps to get there, right? Like, again, this is my first time getting a startup this far. Like, you and I have had one company before. It was Nihongo Shark, which kind of became this one, and then before that, I had one other company that was around for like a year, and then I sold it for a small amount. That's my experience with startups. So this is our first time getting this far in a company. So we're also charting this path, trying to figure out how do we balance everything, how to build this business sustainably so that we can reach all of these goals, to do all these things that are, that we have passion for, that, you as our community have passion for. Yeah. So while you are all on your struggle and your journey of learning Japanese, we're all on our journey and struggle of figuring how to, make this company something that can last the ages, if that makes sense. As to why it's difficult to say exactly when we'd be able to have more languages available. You know, it's
Yeah, we also just don't want to say something and then not hit the goal.
exactly. You know, we don't.
We've done that before too, and
We
we don't,
have.
it doesn't feel
It
very
doesn't.
good.
That's some one of the things that we learned. Like I was just saying, right? Like you gotta stick with what you can do, with what you know, with what's realistic. So, yeah, definitely. For now, though, you know what we have to do is keep improving what we have, and grow our audience, grow our subscriber base, so that we can do these things. Yeah. All right. So I'm looking at chat again. When people explain, this is from Josh. When people explain how to pronounce radiurudero with your tongue, it was like bleh. And ja, ju, jo are so difficult to say quickly. I remember that. Oh, it was hard.
It's still hard, I
Yeah.
think, sometimes.
Ja, ju, jo. I feel mostly okay with it, but I'm not a native speaker, so I probably am butchering it in some way. But I just remember like first trying to get my tongue to do that was a struggle. Now I probably don't do it perfectly all the time, but it's less of a struggle. It's more of a natural
Yeah,
feeling
I want
in my
more.
mouth.
We talked about sentences. One thing that I want to do at some point, not too far off, hopefully, is have sentences that are tongue twisters for us students. Though, you know, I mean, it's like Sally sells seashells down by the seashore type of thing.
Yeah.
But that aren't like ridiculous sentences. Sentences that sound natural, but would to a student be difficult to say. I want to have
Yeah.
collections of them that people can use in like shadow loops.
Practice sets for shadow loops like that. Yeah.
Um,
Like a difficult to pronounce shadow loops album would be sweet. Like
yeah, well,
commonly
also,
difficult to pronounce.
yeah, and ones that are focused on specific sounds like that. For example, like
Yeah.
you know, da di.
But in sentences
Yeah,
that are
dude.
real, like so not just like repeating sounds for no reason.
Yeah, oh,
Yeah.
of course.
Yeah, no, it's like a real thing that you would say.
Because individual words are a lot easier to pronounce, but then you have to say it in a sentence.
That's the thing.
My brain is making a sentence, and
Yeah.
it gets tricky unless you've developed the mouth muscles and the muscle memory to make
Right.
those sounds.
Which can come through training shadow loops.
Yeah. So
yeah, that's a really good idea, and we should get that like soon. TM.
yeah, it's actually not that hard for us to do compared to some other things that we're trying to do. Jody.
Just saying, Jody, is it enough of a tongue twister? That sounds evil. I don't know if evil is quite the right term there, but I can totally understand. I could almost guess like where you're at in your studies because I can 100% relate with this. I remember specifically Jody being like, "Oh, how am I ever gonna say that? I'm never gonna be able to say that." And now I can say it in a sentence. I don't know if it's perfect, but it's good enough.
Yeah.
It's really fun to do this and talk to students for like.
Yeah, I was reading something about teaching accent reduction in English to students. And it was from this woman who's like one of the leading experts on doing this. She trains people to, for example, to speak in an American accent.
Okay, yeah.
Because they're going to act in movies, or you know, teach someone to speak in this accent because they're going to act in a TV show or something.
Right.
And she mentioned something interesting was that sometimes when she tries to teach accent reduction to non-native speakers of English, they sort of resist it because they feel like their way of pronouncing English is part of their identity, even if it's not natural. And I thought that was really interesting because I always was just totally ashamed of my bad pronunciation. And like the reason I say this is because Caleb was like gonna go mention that. Well, but you know, maybe I don't say it perfectly, but it's understandable how I say it. And I think it's really easy to forget that that's what matters the most. Is if people can understand what you're saying.
If you're intelligible.
And I try to sound like a native speaker because it's fun and it boosts my ego, but it's not like necessary if my pronunciation is good enough that people understand what I'm saying.
Right.
All the time.
That's the first threshold. once you get to the point where
Yeah.
people can understand you all the time, like you're pronouncing things intelligibly enough, after you hit that level of pronunciation ability, what you do next is up to you. For
Yeah.
Niko, and even
It's
for
pretty.
myself, I am striving towards like native level pronunciation. So like, you pick up a phone and talk to me in Japanese, you wouldn't know if I was a Japanese person or not. Like, that's my goal ultimately, but it's not necessary to strive that far
Yeah.
into. Um,
Although I think Japanese is a little bit harder on students than
than
English for
English
this
is. I
because
think so too.
in, in the US, for example, we're just used to people speaking with strange accents in English.
Strange,
So
quote unquote strange.
if
Like,
I hear
it's
yeah, a
relative.
strange like a strange
Your accent
meaning
is strange
foreign,
if you like, if you are from the Midwest and you hear Niko's accent, then the Niko's accent is strange. Like, that's what he means by
yeah,
strange accent.
strange meaning foreign, alien,
Yeah,
unknown, unfamiliar.
right.
Not what not what I'm used to. So if I hear someone speak with an accent that I'm not familiar with, it's not the same as the people that I grew up with.
Yeah,
I don't think, oh, this person sucks at English. They're not going to know what I'm going to say if I
right,
respond to them.
right.
That actually happens in Japanese. If
Unfortunately,
you
so.
don't sound really good, they often assume that you're bad at Japanese, even if you're great at it.
Right,
Um, So if the ego thing is really important to you, you could put more emphasis on having fantastic pronunciation earlier. And Japanese people will often think that you're better at Japanese than someone who is better than you with worse pronunciation.
right. Just a little
Um,
thing that exists while learning this language. Yeah,
it is pretty. It's still valuable because sometimes it's really an inconvenience if a Japanese person assumes that you don't know Japanese when you do.
it can be.
Um, but overall, like I wouldn't worry about it too much.
Of all the things to be worried about, I wouldn't spend much time on that one. It really, that one you can work out in the in the given circumstance that you're in. Like, it's all right. Um,
Yeah.
One last thing that I wanted to talk about is around like Black Friday and Cyber Monday, we're working on a bit of a holiday promotion for everyone. Um, yeah, so that's fun. So that's next week. We're gonna have I think we're working on like a buy one gift one sort of situation. So if you were to purchase a, also we want to get gifting into the platform as well. The holiday season and such. So during the promo time, if you were to buy an annual subscription for Native Shark, you would also get a gift code that you could give to a friend or colleague or family member. Um, and yeah, just so you buy one and you get a gift to give someone a year subscription essentially. And then we also are working on bringing in gifting. So if you would like to gift a year of language education to someone, you're able to do that. Um, Cinder says that's neat. Thank you. Yeah, it's not quite ready, so it's not, sales doesn't start until, or promotion doesn't start until next week. And I know, Cinder, you've asked
Yeah.
about this already, and so I'm gonna bring it up again. But referrals soon. Those are also, we got the news today from the development team that the backend supports referrals now, and we have to just bring it to the front end. So this means both the partnership program for creators and for students to be able to refer. So you could basically give someone your own link, and if they sign up to Native Shark um, with that link, if they subscribe, you as the person who gave that referral to them, you'll get to know that you contributed, and that you'll have like a tally of people that you've got to join. And then I was going to talk to Chie, and I haven't done so yet. I don't know if she's listening, but now she knows. I wanted to get like a some sort of badges that exist. Like, if you're after you refer, like, I don't know, 5 friends or something, you get like some sort of exclusive Chie art badge or something, that kind of thing. So yeah, the referrals as well are coming with this.
Yeah,
Backend
we could come
supports
up with
it.
a whole suite of bonuses.
Yeah.
Yeah, like something even more amazing if you refer like 100
Right,
people.
yeah, yeah. Anything you guys have too, like, you think might be fun, feel free to let us know. For like how to make the referral program even more fun for everyone. And then the partnership program is for like creators or bloggers, things like that, who have a audience of a certain size, if they want to reach out to us or we reach out to them, we can set up some sort of partnership wherein they have a link that they can have people sign up from, and there'd be some benefits for the sign up and that sort of a thing. Free holidays in
holiday.
Japan with every referral. Woo!
I wish.
I wish. So yeah, anyway,
Someday
I'll let you guys know.
maybe we'll have like a school where we can give people scholarships and stuff.
Right?
But it's
Yeah, like
a way.
refer 1,000 people, like win a scholarship.
Yeah.
That'd be sweet.
For the holiday sale, this buy one gift one free. I keep imagining some person who gives a friend or family member like, "Oh, hey, I bought you a year of Japanese education," and just keeps it a secret that actually they bought themselves a year and then gave their person the free coupon.
The free coupon. That's funny. I like it.
Sounds like something I would have done. No, I probably would have told them, but still.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And with that, I think we've gone on for about an hour and 48 minutes. That's a substantial amount of time. I think we might call this episode here.
Yeah, that works.
And then we'll be around next week at the same time. Bro, that's totally happening. Yeah, for sure it is. I'm looking forward to the referral program. Yeah, me too. It'll be fun. And then, yeah, again, like if you guys have ideas, that might be a little more reasonable than free holidays in Japan. Appreciate the idea though.
As much as that's what we actually want to
That's
give
what we
people.
wish we could do. Like seriously, if there was a way, but alas. Yeah. All right. Thanks everyone. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
It's been fun. We'll talk to you guys all next week for the episode 4. All right. Take care.
See ya.
Keep up the good luck with your studies.
You too.